sis. I don't think I understand. You got up bad. Like, hello.
Hey, girl.
Hi.
For those of you who are listening, we on the good up setup with a good up mic dem. I'm DJ on a good up setup now, okay? Shout out to our Patreon family.
Yes.
For those of you who have been good up Patreons for at least the last couple of months, I want to show you guys where your money been going. Like, y'all assisted with the upgrade of some equipment for my good up co-hosts.
Thank you guys. You guys are like sugar daddies. Thank you.
I know. Oh my God. I always wanted one.
I have feel so spoiled. Like when that package reached, I was like, things are coming in the mail that I didn't order. That's like the best feeling. I don't know about you, but doesn't it just feel good when an Amazon package arrives and you're not the one who ordered it, but it's for you?
Girl, my love language is gifts.
So thank you guys.
It always feels good.
Thank you guys for supporting our work and investing in our upgrades, because all it does is give you guys better content to listen to. So
exactly, this upgrade is for you. Okay,
what a
just
sound
like a
investment.
sugar daddy. Yeah, just like a sugar daddy benefits from spending on his or her sugar baby.
Precisely.
Yeah, just like they get something from it, you guys get something from it. Come on now tell a friend to tell a friend to become a patron.
Period.
Well, welcome back, guys. We are so excited to be here for yet another week of the Good Up podcast. Deidre, I am going to let you introduce today's topic. I feel like I do a whole lot of talking on a regular basis, and I take the opportunity to introduce the topics all the time. But this one, you know so much more in this arena, but also I love to hear you talk about this type of work. So I give you the floor. I give you the floor.
Okay, you guys. First of all, you're not going to get the kind of formal introduction you get from Hey Isaac, because I don't be remembering shit. But you guys are obviously listening to the Good Up pod because you guys are good up. Today, y'all, we are talking about shadow work. What the fuck is shadow work? It sounds like witchcraft. I know. But shadow work is another form of saying working on yourself, basically. Healing your traumas, healing your inner wounds, getting to know yourself, apologizing for things you need to apologize for, facing your demons. Thank you. That's the best way to put it. Shadow work is basically facing your demons. We all got them. Some of our demons might be a little more grimy than others, but regardless, whether it's trauma from childhood or trauma from adulthood, or even ancestral trauma. Some of our habits, we don't even realize, are behaviors that we've inherited from our ancestors. And so part of being alive right now is getting to know yourself, mastering yourself, improving yourself constantly. And the only way to truly master yourself, improve yourself, and, make your life the baddest life there ever was is to do shadow work. And that's what we're talking about today.
I'm here for it. I just letting out, that if I get emotional during this episode, me want to hear shit but I fuck on social media. Okay.
That it's important. Our emotions are necessary and all that jazz.
No, they are, and that's why I'm giving that forewarning. Like I legit might get emotional because like planning this topic this whole week, and you could ask Deidre, like I've been texting her about how excited I've been, but also this episode is very relevant. By the time it airs, obviously this hopefully what's going on right now won't be the current event, but like there's been a lot of conversation online about like sexual assault and stuff like that. And a bitch has been triggered. So this episode is relevant because a part of my shadow work is my history with rape and sexual assault. So yeah, let's get into the shits. Like, girl. What you want? Well, you know what?
Before we get into it, I'm gonna do something I like to do when I go on live with my shooting stars. Shout out to my shooting stars. I want to check in with you first. How are you doing today?
I have had a day. I have been, like I said, this week has been a very triggering week for me. I've had to do a lot of nurturing, a lot of disconnecting. And then I get rear-ended on my way to work this morning. So for those of you, I know. So for those of you who know me and have known me for a couple of years, you know that like car accidents are a trigger. I have worked through PTSD as it relates to a major accident that I was in a couple years ago. So the accident this morning wasn't bad. I'm fine. My car can get fixed. Like, things are replaceable. But because it was a trigger, like, I think I was a little more shaken up than a normal person would be by a fender bender. And because not everyone understands my history, which is what another thing we should touch on when it comes to shadow work and triggers and trauma.
I'm glad you said that.
Not everybody, like not everybody at work knows, okay, obviously this is a trigger for Heiza. Obviously she's more bothered than a normal person would be. I had to kind of put on a face at work and be like, everything's cool. Let me call these fucking insurance people. But like, I legit wanted to cry all day because I was like, I have been dreading this moment since the last accident. Like, I knew the next accident would come in. So for it to happen, it was just like, okay, what do we do? What do we learn in therapy? How do you cope with this? Breathe. Like, I legit been trying to maintain my shit all day. But honestly, I'm proud of myself because like, I knew exactly what to do because I've been doing shadow work, because I've been doing therapy. Like, I knew how to take care of myself in response to what happened today. So like, yeah, we're like, fuck it, let's record this episode. Irrelevant.
Period. I love it. And you know, it's so funny. I'm glad you mentioned triggers because that is one of the things that tend to get us on a path to doing shadow work, is us realizing that certain things trigger us. Now, some people, they learn their triggers and then they use their triggers as an excuse for bad behavior. When the reality is when we learn that certain things trigger us, the objective is to get to the bottom of why those things trigger us so that we can heal those things. And 90% of the time, I'm gonna be honest, I just threw that number out there. I don't know the real percentage, but the reality is a big, great deal, a majority of the time, it has to do with our inner child. A lot of the time, it's something that we kind of crafted in our own subconscious based on an experience from childhood. And it's probably just a lack of communication. We might have created our own reality based on one experience in childhood. And because that's what children do, they use their imaginations. They kind of create an answer, if you will, based on an experience. And then they spend their whole lives thinking that's reality. And then as adults, they get triggered and their inner child is wounded and reacting, and they have episodes or moments, and you know, at some point it becomes you know, I don't want to say inappropriate, but at some point it becomes problematic, and then you realize, wait, something has to give. Cue shadow work, right? So when you hear shadow work, what do you think of, Heiza?
When I hear shadow work, I think of big bad dark Heiza sitting in a corner in the shadows somewhere, right? Like, the first time I heard the word, I was like, damn, so this is my time to walk on like evil bitch Heiza. Like, so you know, there's that person, there's that side of you that nobody knows, right?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Where you're aware of truly, I don't want to say the evil person you are, but just you're aware of
your shadow self. Yeah.
Your shadow self, the exact type of person you are, the things you think that nobody has access to, the things you believe nobody has access to, habits you might have that nobody, you know, stuff like that. So I'm a imagery type person. So I literally pictured big bad, you know, bad bitch Heiza with like devil hands and like she's
Does
a
she
shadow.
have red eyes? Like
she does
red
not,
glowing eyes?
But she is dark. She, you know, like I picture that person, and when I try to visualize myself and the shadow work that I have to do, I literally picture that person releasing certain things and becoming brighter. Like literally cartoon imagery. Like I will picture that while I'm meditating because that helps me to visualize releasing certain things. But yeah, she dark, she shadowy, she got,
you know what's funny? The analogy that I give to my clients, who I love dearly, every single one of my clients, I have some clients who are very stubborn about their shadow work. And no matter how many readings they get, I said, baby, at the end of the day, shadow work. So the analogy I give is, pretend you're walking like down an alley and you hear like, not even down an alley, right? You're like walking down the street and you walk past an alley and you hear like a loud sound, right? Like something fell and you're like, oh my God, what the fuck was that? And you look back and you look at the wall and you see that the shadow of something really big and scary is on the wall. And you're like, what the fuck is that? And you're terrified. And then out comes a kitten. Like, so like whatever, however the angle was set up, the light was shining on this little kitten. And based on the angles, the kitten looks like a fucking lion against the wall, but it's really just a kitten. Like a lot of the time, by the time we get done our shadow work, some of the stuff that we reflect on, it's like, wow, I could have gotten through that a lot sooner. But sometimes people just genuinely sometimes just don't have the support. And the reality is a lot of our elders, a lot of our parents wasn't doing no damn shadow work. They were in survival mode. You know what I mean? So we didn't really have examples. I'm not speaking for everyone, obviously, but a lot of us just simply didn't have examples of people who even had the time to work on themselves. A lot of our parents,
I would argue that even those of us who had good examples of people who, you know, took care of themselves and went to therapy and things like that, sometimes didn't have examples of what shadow work is. And because I think a lot of people, you know, promote self-care, promote therapy and all of that stuff, but aren't really willing or, you know, really acknowledging the fact that shadow work is like, shadow work is major leagues of self-care, growth, therapy. Like a lot of people like to go to the baseball game, but they ain't ready to like go to the major leagues. Like,
right. And ironically enough, therapy is a form of shadow work, but it's not all the way there. Unless, of course, you're being radically honest with your therapist. And a lot of people tend to lie to their therapist in some fashion. There's no matter, like, I'm very honest with my therapist, but I'm sure there is something that I have not divulged to her. Now, the reason why it's easy for me to be so honest with my therapist is because shadow work, right? But as long as your ego is involved, you're going to lie to your therapist at some point. And the whole objective of shadow work is to make sure that your ego is not leading, right? The show. Make sure your ego is not the person at the forefront. You want to connect to your higher self. And in order to connect to your higher self, you have to face your shadow self. And the lowest vibration is shame. That's the bottom line. And our shadow selves is that part of ourselves that we're too ashamed to share with others. And our shadow self, you know, we kind of develop that version of ourselves over time, certain experiences, you know what I mean? Certain examples. My shadow self is manipulative as fuck and an excellent liar. Like, and the objective in shadow work is not to let that person go and suppress them and become, and I talked about this on my live last night. It's not to become, because young toxic positivity is a thing. The objective of shadow work is not to suddenly become this like golden angel who has never done anything wrong.
Great.
Everything's great. Positivity. What positive vibes only? No. It's to know your full self. It's all about duality. Because sometimes, as my brother Jay-Z said, sometimes you need your ego. You got to remind these fools. Like sometimes you need to call your ego and say, hey, come here. You need to take over this one. But your ego is not supposed to be like running the show. Yeah. And your shadow self is also a part of you. You know what I mean? Yeah. So yeah, my shadow self is very manipulative and she speaks in a very monotone, you know, she has one of those tones of voices where you have to lean in to hear what she has to say. You know, she's one of those.
My shadow self has a horrible temper.
Really?
Thinks everything should be about her. Thinks she should be in control of everything.
Did you hear me slurp my drink just now?
You could.
Sorry, y'all.
No, go ahead. My shadow self thinks she should be in control of everything, thinks it all should be about her. Really ugly side, temper-wise. What else? Insanely jealous. Oh my God.
My shadow self is very possessive. Not jealous, but possessive.
Yeah.
My shadow self is she's very possessive and very, once she attaches herself to somebody and loves that somebody, it's like, this person is mine. Like mine, all mine. Like you can go wherever you want, you can talk to whoever you want, but you and whoever you talk to must understand that you are mine.
Yeah, no, my shadow self is very like, we dated, cool, we moved on, but now somebody else dating you. I don't like that. Like,
I used to be like that.
I would rather be the center of your universe. Like I would rather it be about me, and I'm kind of annoyed that it's not.
Damn.
Listen, but let me tell you how much work it's taken, and just a disclaimer for those of you who listening. When we talk about shadow work, this is in no way me insinuating that like I've done my shadow work, is overweight, I've moved on. I am at the very beginning of my shadow work. And the very beginning for me is even acknowledging that there is a shadow self or deeper work that has to be done, because I was one of those people who would meditate for 30 minutes one day and then decide, oh, I'm going to tell everybody all about the joys of meditation, because obviously I know I do it now. Like self-care is my thing, right? Because for a lot of us is like, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm going to therapy. I know there's this deeper, darker side of things that I need to explore, but fuck all of that. Like we could put that in a box and keep it there. I'm in a good mood every day, so like we good, you know?
Yeah. And that's how it'll go for a lot of us, you know. And also shadow work is like a never ending process. It gets easier. The journey takes, like, at some point there's a lot that you face and you heal and you move on. But as long as you're alive, as long as you're on this life path, there's gonna be other things that you have to face. And the beauty of doing shadow work is it takes less time to solve those types of problems. And as certain things come up, it takes less time to process certain negative emotions and things like that. And also, things that typically trigger you probably eventually don't become triggers anymore. You know what I mean? And even if you are triggered, you know how to manage coping with that trigger as opposed to lashing out because you're triggered. You know what I mean? Um, I feel like I also went through that period in the beginning where I felt like everything was fine, everything was positive. You know what I mean? One thing is like, it's one thing when you think your shadow work is complete and it's like, oh baby, far from it. Like, far from it. But it's all part of the process, you know. Um, do you what ways have you done shadow work so far?
So I guess I could speak to my shadow work right now, because I think of all the times that I have tried to improve myself as a person, like internally, even with the times I went to therapy, none have been as impactful as what I'm doing now, because I was never honest with myself about what really needed to be fixed until
Mm,
now.
yeah.
Um, Now I'm exploring this idea of like my ego and, you know, what
Mm,
it means to center myself and nurture myself, but
mhm.
also what that means for other people.
Yeah.
Like I said, a big part of my shadow self is this belief that it always has to be about me, that my needs are the most important, that my opinion is the one that's mattered, or that matters, that my way of doing it is the right way.
Mhm,
Um, so right now I'm just exploring like, what does that mean, you know, for me, and where can I
mhm.
find balance in that? And, you know, doing things like when I feel the need to speak up and say something, whether it's in a meeting or in with my friends or in things that I do, I literally say to myself in my head, like, hey, ego, check that. Like, is
Mhm,
this you? Is this valid? Or is this your ego needing to be, you know, is this you just needing to feel good about yourself, right?
mhm,
So stuff like that I'm doing. Another thing that I'm doing, and this was because of your advice, is I'm exploring going back to therapy. I'm, you know, consulting with therapists to find the right one for me, because I was one of those people who was lying to her therapist. Not necessarily lying, but the trauma that I went through when I was younger, the sexual assault, I would bring it up in therapy as, yeah, this is one of the things we might need to talk about in the future. But I would always make my current, whatever the issue was, the bigger thing, right? My anxiety, I stressed about work, blah, blah. Like I would come up with this big monumental thing to fill the
avoid
therapist's
talking
time.
about
Yeah.
yeah.
To take up their time, because I never wanted to get to the trauma part. And then I would
Mhm,
tell people, like, yeah, I've gone to therapy, I've talked about it. But a lot of the work I've done in terms of sexual assault and triggers and all that stuff has been just my own work.
mm,
So my shadow work now is me telling myself, hey, you're not as okay as you think you are.
mm,
And you need to bring this up in therapy. And you
mhm,
need to be okay bringing it up in therapy and trusting your
mhm.
therapist to be able to deal with that.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's layers and layers and layers of shit, because we're humans, we have complicated lives, which means we have a
absolutely.
lot of different things that we want to address and deal with.
Yeah.
Um, but that's been taking the forefront, is just like being honest with myself about what my problems or things I'm trying to get through actually are,
Mm,
instead of trying to cover them up with something else.
I get that. I get that, girl. Damn. Whew.
I know, right?
And that's real. I used to no, but you know what's ironic is I did the same thing with my first therapist. And
Mm,
when she would try to bring it up, I would blatantly let her know I don't want to talk about that. And she would tell me, well, Deidre, at some point we have to talk about it because it's something that's affecting your life. And I would be like, no, it's not. And then she would call me out and show me examples of how it's affecting my life and how I'm letting it dictate certain decisions. And I would be like, eventually I ghosted her and I used her scheduling as an excuse. But the reality was I felt us getting closer to having those discussions about my experiences with sexual assault. And I was not, I
yeah.
wasn't ready. Sis wasn't ready.
I feel like I manipulated my therapist
Word?
at one
I
point.
must
Yeah.
know. Tell me the things.
So in therapy, there is a specific form of therapy called cognitive behavioral therapy, which is used often when it comes to people with anxiety. I'm aware of this. So when a therapist gets focused on cognitive behavioral therapy, they focus on the assignments, the repetition, the here's your homework, here's what you need to do. How was it? So it fills up a lot of the session. So whenever I used to go to therapy, the first thing I would bring up is I'm always anxious, which I deal with anxiety, but I would use my anxiety as a filler so that we would have so much to talk about there that we would never get to the trauma. And then when I would feel my therapist kind of focusing too heavily on like cognitive behavioral therapy, I would be like, I don't feel like I connected with my therapist for real. And I would ghost them.
Damn.
And I will be fully honest because this is a Good Up podcast and this is what we've always done. Like my last therapist, my most recent one that I started with in the spring, ghosted her for the
You
same
ghosted
reason.
your therapist? Oh,
I
hey,
did.
Izan.
There were layers to that. A part of it was the fact that my living situation, I had a roommate at the time and like
Mhm,
I was working remotely, so my therapy sessions were also in the house.
mhm.
I didn't feel comfortable going to therapy with that person in the house and being able to
Right.
hear my sessions. So
Oh,
that was a part of it. But now that I'm doing my shadow work and acknowledging shit, I'm like,
mhm.
yeah, you've been using your anxiety to keep the therapist busy to
Yeah.
avoid the shit that you really need to talk about, which is sexual trauma, my mother, my upbringing,
Yeah.
all the big, heavy, like, yeah, this gonna be a lot type shit.
You know what though? I can't obviously everybody's situation is different, but what I will say is at least speaking for myself, that time that I spent talking with my most recent therapist, which this is only my second therapist, the time that I've spent with her talking about my current events, excuse me, that connection that I've built with her has made it so I'm so comfortable talking with her about, my history with sexual abuse, my mother, like anything going on with the family. So it makes sense to talk about the current events. You know what I mean? Because I won't lie. When I first started seeing my current therapist, I after like the third session, I found myself like, yo, there's no connection. And then something kind of monumental happened within my friendship and my now ex. And I had no choice because that shit had me distressed. I almost lost my best friend. Um, I was experiencing, and I know part of it is because I went through a spiritual awakening. I was experiencing emotions that I didn't know existed. I was, because I've been a very emotionally detached person for most of my life. And it was something that I actually prided myself on, being so able to control my emotions in such a way. But I went through this period of having no control over my emotions, being very emotionally expressive, and it was strange as fuck to me. And because of that, I had no choice but to open up to my therapist. And that situation, that turn of events in my life is what made me open up to her. And I had no choice. I didn't give a fuck about our lack of connection. I just needed to understand what the fuck was going on with me. And so she and I really worked together. We formed a bond, and obviously not like a personal bond, but enough for me to feel comfortable just being fully transparent with her. Like, this is what's going on. And between then and now, and even the first time she told me that I was making progress, I felt like a kid who just got like a gold sticker on like a spelling. I was bragging to like, I was like, babe, listen, my therapist told me I'm making progress. We actually, and I'm really proud to say, I don't care. We actually recently switched me from weekly sessions to bi-weekly sessions. Um, because I've been able to process my emotions in a way that I never knew before. I didn't even know that I didn't know how to process emotions. Hey, Isa. Ain't that some shit? I genuinely did not know how to process emotions. Like something would be upsetting in my life, I would fix it and then I would move on and distract myself with work. And I'm a natural problem solver. So when problems arise, I just instantly go into problem solver mode. And I don't give myself a moment to feel the emotions that come with that situation or anything. And then once the problem is solved, I'm relieved. So I'm moving on to the next thing.
I'm the
Or
opposite.
really?
I don't process that shit, but I feel it way too much.
Yeah, I
Like
don't.
I let myself feel and feel and feel and feel until I can't feel no more. Like,
yeah, I used to just be so. I didn't realize how emotionally detached I was. Not even with people, but even within myself. To the point where when something devastating would happen, or if I would be sad, I would instantly just replace it with work or just a chore or something. I would have projects. And I think that's probably why I spent so much time as a DIY or like all that time I was spending on projects. I was just distracting myself from my emotions. You know what I mean? And
so we talking a lot about therapy as it relates to shadow work. But if someone, let's say they don't have access to therapy, let's say they're not ready to start therapy, does that mean they're not ready to start shadow work, or is there a way for
not at
them to
all.
start? Yeah.
Well, for one, I feel like the easiest way to do shadow work is to get to know yourself as best as you can. So the first thing I would always recommend is to look at your relationships. Look at the ways that you communicate with others and look at what's going on in your circle, if that makes sense. So if you're at this point where you and all your friends starting to fall out, it's time to really start looking at things objectively. Another thing to do, and it's funny, I posted this on my story, I think today, this author, pretty much saying, show a man, in order for somebody to be better, you have to show them what they're like. So one of the easiest forms of starting that shadow work is asking people how you're impacting them, letting them know that it's a safe space, letting them know that this is not intended to be like a fight or anything like that. But I really want to know, like, for instance, let's say you and your friends are all in a conversation and you and somebody disagree on something. Ask that person how you impacted them, how you came off, if they felt like how they felt about your contribution to that, disagreement or what have you. But that's a good way to start. Start with the people around you. Another good thing is to start with yourself, right? And I know this is a little iffy. This is I'm treading, thin ice here, but pull your birth chart. Your astrology will tell you your astrology chart. And for those who don't know, obviously astrology is not just the horoscopes in the newspaper. If you know the exact time you were born and the city you were born in, like where you were born, you take that information, your birthday, your birth time, and the location you were born in. You literally Google free natal chart. You're going to find all kinds of different websites that have a natal chart that will tell you everything you need to know. If you have and this is a shameless plug, but it's also like, I want you guys to try doing it for yourself first. Take your time with it because everybody has access to this. This is free information. And you read your chart thoroughly. Take your time with it. It's not a sit down and read it in 10 minutes kind of thing. Take your time with it. Get to know what each thing means. And if it's too much, book a natal chart reading with me. I will help you get to know, because essentially the astrology is going to point to your personality traits. It is going to point to certain experiences in your life. It's going to help get you to understand even your attachment style can kind of be figured out just by looking at your natal chart. So find different ways to get to know yourself. Another thing to use if you want to use certain tools is numerology. You can pull your numerology report. It'll tell you the same thing. It'll tell you your life path number, your soul urge number. These different numbers kind of point to where your priorities tend to lie. Sometimes we don't even realize that our motivations are what get in the way of our relationships. And that contributes to sometimes our shadow self. Yeah. So there's many ways.
I will suggest also too that for people, and obviously, Deidre, you know how I feel about astrology. Like, where I'm in there with you. I'm a witchy bitch. I'm on my way there. But for people who just aren't on that journey and might not want to use those tools, Something as simple as journaling
Absolutely. Absolutely.
can definitely help you to identify certain things, especially if you journal for a consistent period of time. Um, for those of you who remember, I came out with a journal 2 years ago, and a friend did it along with me. We did like a 30-day thing.
Mhm.
And what we noticed was that as much as all 30 days had a different prompt, certain things in our lives would come up multiple times.
Mm.
Journaling things. So for me, and this was before the podcast, my mother kept coming up
Damn.
in all of my, not all of them, but almost all of them.
Mhm.
So through that journaling, I recognized, okay, there's something here, Wayamora.
Mhm.
Like, I hadn't recognized how I was feeling about my relationship with my mother until I started doing that.
Yeah.
And podcast came, and we know what happened.
Girl.
But journaling can be so good. Physical time with yourself. Whether it's through physical exercise. I've heard that masturbation can be a form of like spirituality and getting in tune with your body and with yourself.
Mhm.
And I feel like the better you get to know your physical self, sometimes it helps you get to know like your spiritual and your internal self as well.
Yeah.
Because sometimes we can't even do something as simple as meditate, because a lot of guided meditation asks you to be in tune with how you're feeling physically before you
Mhm.
start to let go mentally. And there was a point where I couldn't meditate because I was like, I don't fucking like my body. So I can't like check in with my body. Like, you
Yeah.
never know, what will allow you to process that time with yourself to the point where you start doing that shadow work and getting to know yourself.
Yeah,
you know?
and that's a good point. And the beauty in that is there's so many avenues to take. One is don't just try to stick to just one, right? And one of the best things you could do is open your mouth. Start talking to the people that you care about and that care about you. Start talking with them. You know what I mean? Share your feelings. And like, hey, as I said, use your journal. And it's funny, just today I told one of my clients, I recommended that after a month of journaling, because she journals a lot. I said, I think maybe once a month, go back and read your journal entries. Because journaling helps us to release a lot of energy, especially mental energy that's consuming us. But a lot of times we don't really reread it. And sometimes, like you did with your mom, and realize, wait a minute, there's a pattern here. There's patterns in our journal entries. Because even me, I I remember going through my journal one time and reading all my entries, and all my entries, my emotions would be everything would be great except for when I start talking about my ex. And I'm like, why the fuck is this nigga in my life if he causes this much? And it's not that he's causing it, because at the end of the day, we're all in control of our reality, right? But I'm like, every time I feel down, it's because I'm either thinking of him or wondering what he's up to or whatever the case may be. He gotta go. He gotta go. Granted, you don't just dip on somebody, but you express what you need. You know what I mean? But communication is so important and so slept on when it comes to shadow work. So slept on.
I think another part of shadow work, even though it has to do with yourself, and correct me if I'm wrong, I feel like another part of shadow work is acknowledging those toxic relationships in your life, the way that
Absolutely.
like your attachment to other people, and you
So
obviously, you touched on this just now, but just like recognizing those relationships, how they make you feel, how you contribute to those relationships.
because one thing, right? Let me tell you something. Whether it's one toxic relationship or five, they all have something in common. Okay. And aside from you being the common denominator, the reality is there's something similar about all of those people. And the objective is for you to learn that lesson. And again, I'm sorry to bring up childhood. This is giving big Freud energy, but your attachment style has a lot to do with the type of people you attract, even who you are and your childhood experiences. Unfortunately, like, I was forming a lot of trauma bonds with people because I had some significant abandonment issues. You know what I mean? The beauty is that the partners that I've been involved with, each one has gotten better than the next, but I still was forming trauma bonds with people. You know what I mean? And my anxiety would be through the roof. You know what I mean? um and a lot of it had to do with my upbringing. You know what I mean? I spent most of my 20s with somebody very emotionally and verbally abusive, and that's because that's all I knew. I thought that was normal. You know what I mean? Um, and then it would be people who are emotionally unavailable. You know what I mean? And then it would be people who are emotionally available, but I was not emotionally available. You know what I mean? And it was just a lot of a lot of up and down. But I also realized that a lot of it had to do with me forming trauma bonds with people based on essentially what I didn't have, if that makes sense. For some, it was me forming bonds with people because I was so used to abuse. And then in other cases, it was me not being used to abuse or encountering somebody who was not abusive and attaching to them very quickly because of it. Does that make sense? Like, it would be me attaching so quickly because it's like, whoa, this person is not toxic. You know what I mean? But then because I'm more available than they are, then I'm losing my shit. Cause I'm like, well, what the fuck? Like, we're together. You know what I mean?
Listen, okay, so before I even start ranting and talking about my whole life, do you believe that shadow work can lead to rebirth,
It does.
breakthrough?
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
It absolutely does. It absolutely does. Like, hands down.
Because I feel like I'm at the beginning stages of my shadow work, but a part of what I'm realizing is that now that I'm here and I've arrived to this place and I've acknowledged all these things and started it, I already feel like I'm experiencing some type of rebirth or breakthrough.
Oh, girl, you are.
Listen. And I could see it because like, and let me, I guess, explain it in detail so that the listeners can kind of visualize it. There was a point in time where I liked everything I was doing. Y'all know me as a content creator. I was constantly posting content. Everything was good. And then I went through this really sudden period where I hated everything I was doing. I didn't recognize myself. I was so comfortable on social media. Everything that I had been building up. So I've been doing this content creator shit for 10 plus years.
You have. You've been doing
right?
this. Hey, Isa does.
I bitch, I ain't new to this. I true to this. Like,
truly, really and truly.
So imagine somebody who has built her entire platform over the course of a decade on social media, all of a sudden being like, I don't fucking like Instagram. I don't like doing this. And I was wondering, is it the platforms? Is it just how social media has changed? Is it this? Is it that? But then what I did was I allowed myself to step back because that's another thing. I had been feeling that for a long time, even before I stopped using Instagram like that. But because I had convinced myself, well, I need to post or else I'm going to become irrelevant. That need to be the center of attention.
Do you remember the episode we did on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So I was like,
episode on that, which was a really good episode.
It was. Shout out to JoJo and Britt. Anyway, but like I needed to stay on there because if I leave, everybody gonna forget about me. Like, my attachment to social media, and I don't know when I realized it, but it came after a long time of me struggling and suffering through that feeling. It just hit me one day, like, bitch, not really who gives a fuck, but like, you feel the need to continue being a content creator because you feel somehow that this attention you're getting online is going to fulfill you. And it's not.
Ooh, baby.
It's not. Because I thought back to the times where I only had 2,000, 3,000 followers, whatever. And I was like, this is cool, but I want 8,000. I'm at 8,000 now. That shit ain't doing nothing for me emotionally. Like, and it sounds superficial, but because this was a big part of my hobbies, my career, what I did on a day-to-day basis, like, it was me. It was everything about who I was. And then I also realized, as a fat woman, I don't like how social media centers on image. Guys. Yeah. I don't like how I feel this pressure to make my body look a certain way in pictures or wear a certain type of clothes. Like, I just started to really dive deep into like what my relationship with social media was. And in doing that, start diving deeper into what my relationship was with myself. So when I started doing that work, it was really hard. Emotionally,
I'm so proud of you.
you. But emotionally, I started going through it because all of a sudden I didn't want to wear makeup anymore. All of a sudden I never wanted to take pictures anymore. This is a bitch who was
Oh,
taking pictures every
wow.
fucking day. Self-portrait work, which a lot of people know me for, I stopped doing.
First of all, the self-portrait work.
Thank you, girl.
You
But
know,
like,
okay.
stop doing it completely.
This
Like,
is random, and I'm sorry to just. I feel like you should build a course on self-portrait work. Carry on.
I want to.
I think your time making self-portraits is done, but teaching others how to do it, that's where the money resides, girl.
No, yeah, definitely. But even that, something that I really like doing, everything just kind of stopped completely. And then Masha came to be. We know the story about that. But I let myself step away from being in front of the camera all the time, being the center of attention, being the person in charge. And I let myself go behind the scenes, and I let the store become the center of attention, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't intentional. It kind of happened off that. But while that was happening, my spiritual journey was kind of happening at the same time. Me acknowledging that maybe I don't believe in God the same way I was raised to believe in God. Like, when I tell Ayo, all of these mental like journeys were happening at the same time. Deidre know, because I was constantly calling Deidre about this shit.
Me and Hayes, I was on the phone, like because I keep telling y'all we're not just co-workers.
Yeah, like doing the natal chart reading, acknowledging that part of myself, like all of that was happening at the same time. And then once I came to the realization, like, okay, I've been trying to go back to the version of Hey Isa that I used to like social media, that was posting all the time, that was a content creator. I've been trying to get her back, right? I'm at the point now where it's like, we're not her anymore. So why do I keep trying to go back? And that's why I brought up the idea of rebirth, because I didn't look at that as a rebirth. For this?
You want to hear something trippy? Don't cry.
I'm not.
Because we are members of the Beehive, right? A lot of people think that Beyonce's song Heaven is about her children that she lost. It's actually her talking about her rebirth. I want you to go back and listen to Heaven. She's talking to herself. She's talking to herself in heaven. And of course, we're going to get distracted by the music video, right? And obviously, Ashley, the baddest fucking background dancer there is the friend in the imagery for the music video. But Beyonce was talking to herself in heaven. Like, when you really pay attention to the lyrics, and everybody goes through a rebirth in some fashion. Some people recognize it, some people don't. But some parts of ourselves just have to be left behind. And that's okay. And heaven couldn't wait for them.
So I don't want to, but we're gonna start closing out the episode here.
Okay.
We're at our time, but guys, so you're listening to all of this week. You're acknowledging that shadow work is this thing that you might need to do. You're wondering, what is it? Why is it important? What do I need to do? I want you guys to continue having this conversation on social media. Tag us, use #GoodUpTuesday, but also DM us if you have any questions when it comes to shadow work. Actually, let me not even say DM us. This is where I'm going to plug in Deidre. DM Deidre. Cash App Deidre. PayPal Deidre. Because this is, something that she can definitely help you with. But I wanted to make sure we start the conversation on this because our next episode continues into this topic of shadow work, but we are also going to talk about generational fucking trauma.
Baby,
so, yeah,
listen.
And we wasn't about to give you a whole hour and a half of this shit because this is a heavy topic.
It's heavy.
And
it's a lot.
Yeah, and even shadow walk. Like, some of you are going to leave this episode and drive to walk in your car and be like, yo, is this something I need to be doing? Are there things I need to look at? Are there things I need to acknowledge? Like, so, sit with us, think about it.
We love y'all so much. I don't know. I'm so grateful for you guys. Obviously, I'm super grateful for you, Hey Isa. I'm grateful for this podcast, our community, and every single person in our community who is doing something for us all to just elevate ourselves individually. Because when we work on ourselves individually, that shit spreads. It's infectious. and the collective, the whole community gets better. And I love to see it.
And that's what the fuck we mean when we tell you that you got up bad. Anyway. All right, guys. We will see you next week right back here on another episode of the Good Up Podcast. Deidre, tell the people them bye.